Hello and welcome back to the FEZ Show. It is the 16th of July and another piece of the puzzle of the driver market has been placed in front of us as Sam Bird has moved to Jaguar and Nick Cassidy has joined Virgin Racing. So we've got so much to talk about today, and with me to do so is William Dodds and Edward Hunter. Morning, boys.
Good evening or good morning, depending on where you are in the world, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose. Well, this the thing is now, right? So we've got to try and make it daily because it currently is the 15th of June. But when this goes out, it will be the 16th of June. So we've got to try and make out like it's still the 16th of June. You've got to try and be current, Ed. Although, to be fair, it is pretty dark in your room, so it does prove, and everyone's got like, it's not dark. We can see you beautifully, but we can tell that it's the evening. It's not like you don't need to be a wizard to work out it's not the daytime.
Oh no, Jack, it's very early morning.
It's 6 o'clock. What are we talking about? Will,
By the
how
way,
are
Will's
you?
here too, yes.
Yeah, I've been locked inside my house for so long that I don't actually know what time of day it is at any point. So, yeah, good morning.
You might have to open the curtains. Maybe you'll find out.
No, can't risk it.
No, I know, I can't risk it. Not with the camera, no. But boys, we got to talk Formula E. We got to talk Formula E, and that is the driver market. First, we'll talk Sam Bird, because obviously we talked about it briefly on the show as it was speculation. We sort of, we put in a request at Formula E to obviously interview Sam Bird and Robin Friends for hopefully future magazine features. But when Virgin said, look, if you're going to do that, don't ask anything about Jaguar. So then that was like a big hint that, okay, it looks like that maybe, Jaguar thing isn't happening. I mean, is happening, sorry. And because they don't want anyone to talk about it. But Will, what did you think of the move, Sam Bird? I think personally, as I said on the previous show, it's a do or die move for Sam. He has to prove himself against Mitch and win a championship. And if he doesn't prove himself against Mitch, that's the end of his Formula E career.
I maybe wouldn't go that harsh because I think there'll always be a place on the grid for someone like Sam Bird. He's a proven winner, proven quality operator. So maybe even if he does go up against Mitch Evans and it doesn't quite work out, I can still see teams wanting to take a punt on him. But yeah, it's a huge move. Really exciting piece of news. And me and Ed were talking kind of off air about feeling a little bit sorry for Collado, but I just think this is the way that Formula E is going now. It's cutthroat, and Jaguar know they've got a good car and they know they've got a great driver in Mitch Evans. And I think that they realise that this is the time to strike, and they want to have the best two drivers they can possibly get in that car to try and win a championship, try and win a constructors championship, try and win a drivers championship. So I think it's a great move for them. Those are two of the best drivers in Formula E, and they've got them on their team, and they've got a good car as well. So I'm so excited to see the battle between them as teammates. I'm really excited to see Bird potentially. The Envision Virgin Racing car isn't slow, but it's not been on quite the same level as the Jaguar this season, I think it's fair to say. So, yeah, I think it's an interesting move all round. I think it only kind of enriches the championship. And, as much as it's kind of hard on Collado, I think that's just the way things are going in Formula E now. You've got to hit the ground running because, there are so many good drivers on the market who teams will snap up.
Yeah, and Ed, I suppose we got to talk about the Collado thing, because I know you've been a big fan of James Collado, but if we're thinking about rookies, and Neil Yarni looks like he's out, and if Pascal Wehrlein ever does get announced by Porsche for next season, and I'm assuming now 15th of July, we'd have to expect an announcement in a couple of days if he's going to be racing, because there is like this period in the rules where you have to announce your driver lineup 3 weeks in advance. And I don't know, because that's a carry on from all the driver swaps before the final 2 races of the season. So they've not got long to announce Pascal Wehrlein if they want that, obviously for him to race in season 6 for Porsche. But we're potentially looking at Neil Yarni and James Collado, obviously 2 rookies this season, losing their seat. Brendan Hartley potentially keeping his seat. We don't know what Dragon decide to do. But what did you make on James Collado and this sort of rookie sort of thing now that they just don't get the chance to prove themselves anymore?
Yeah, I think, especially from, like you said, perspective of someone who's a fan of James Collado, I know not everyone is, but I am. It's a little bit, I don't want to say disheartening, but sometimes, he's only had 5 races to really show what he could do, and obviously he's been the thing that's counted against him, I guess, is the fact that his qualifying has not been particularly stellar. His best was 10th in Marrakesh, which was the last race he did before lockdown, of course, and the pandemic set in. But he was always pretty much stronger in the races. I felt able to score a few points. But what's counting against him, and Will was saying this to me as well off air, is that Mitch Evans has been excelling, getting the car onto the podium, winning races, and James Calado has not really been looking like anywhere near in a position to do that. And obviously, you can say, well, he's a rookie, he's still getting used to the championship, still getting used to the car, but at the same time, you get put in the car and you have to it's like you have to deliver instantly, I guess. And it's a similar issue with Neil Yarni, although Yarni unfortunately doesn't have any points to his name. I think the reason that Porsche haven't announced Wehrlein for Berlin is because they probably are planning to stick with Yarni to at least see out the season, because Yarni was a big part of obviously Porsche's LMP1 program in Le Mans in World Endurance Championship, and he won Le Mans in 2016. He was just he did it for like 4 or 5 years or something like that, where he was basically one of their lead drivers, and of course won the championship one year as well. And so there's obviously a lot of the same people in that program in Formula E, and showing a lot of loyalty to him. So I can understand why they might want to keep him. But Wehrlein seems to be who they want for next year.
Yeah, and it's interesting. What do you think, though, Ed, very quickly, just coming back to you on the Sam Bird thing, obviously we heard Will's thoughts and we heard my thoughts. Do you think it's a do or die for him, or do you see it as, in that Jaguar is moving, and, could Sam take that team to the next level and they're pushed on for Tech Cheetah, and then, and Sam's like that missing piece in the puzzle to move the team forward? Or is it just slot him in the car, and if he doesn't perform, then he's out?
You make him sound like he's the light bulb and not a driver. But yeah, personally, I think from Jaguar's perspective, they want to win the Constructors' Championship, and they feel like they have one driver who's bringing in all the points and another driver who isn't doing as well. So if we had 2 Mitch Evans, then we would be fighting up with BMW and Techeetah, and possibly even being ahead of them. And so they can't get to Mitch Evans, but they can get Sam Bird, who they've been courting for several years, remember. So this has sort of been a while coming. And I remember saying a few weeks ago rather, that we had a question about, is Sam Bird ever going to win a championship? And I went against the grain. I said, assuming that he would stay at Virgin, I said basically that he could become the Sterling Moss of Formula E, someone who wins races almost every season, who's really highly rated, but doesn't quite get that title to his name that he so desperately craves. And maybe this is a move that's going to turn him away from that fate, possibly. He could get completely beaten by Mitch Evans, and I suppose it's foreseeable that could damage his reputation, which up to now he's pretty much been unchallenged as the team leader at Virgin. Of course, Robin Freins came in, and Robin Freins has pretty been the only one to really win races as well as Bird in the same season, beat him last year in the Drivers' Championship. So Virgin will be in good hands even without Sam Bird. But it is a risky move for Bird, but perhaps a necessary one, and one that definitely is going to help Jaguar in the fight for the Constructors' Championship. So yeah, there's lots of positives. I think it really makes sense from both perspectives.
Yeah, but Will, Nick Cassidy, right? Virgin, Sam's actual replacement at Virgin Racing. We saw it. Well, I say it's been reported. People have seen it coming. I don't know what to make of it. Obviously, he's a Super Formula champion, so he's coming in. He's coming in on really good terms at the moment, and he proved himself in the Race at Home Challenge. I don't know if you can prove yourself in the Race at Home Challenge, but he looked incredibly quick there. So obviously, there is some form of raw talent, obviously, going into that seat. How he adapts to Formula E and the whole one-day format and the racing and the rough and contact of it, who knows? So you'd think Virgin would try and sign a high-profile driver to sort of replace Sam Bird. They've gone with Nick Cassidy, who's got the talent. Maybe not as many people have heard of him, so it might ease the pressure on Nick Cassidy coming into that seat and performing well in the championship alongside Robin Freins.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and as we've been saying, maybe Cassidy won't get a huge amount of time to prove himself, and this is kind of his shot that he has to take. I think that on the evidence of what he's achieved, as you said, the Super Formula champion, and he was very impressive in the Marrakesh rookie test, and I think I read that the team were incredibly impressed with his speed, his feedback, just the kind of way that they were working with him, and they know him. And I think it is kind of the obvious move. I think Cassidy deserves a chance. I think he's kind of done enough to earn this opportunity. And as we've seen, he won't get all the time in the world. But I think that it's a good move from them, and now it's up to him to go and kind of prove that he deserves it. I think that in France they've got another really good driver as well. So, as Ed said, France beat Sam Bird in the championship last season, and while it hasn't kind of all come together for him this season, it hasn't really come together for Bird, other than running race one. So, I think it's a good move. Obviously, they're going to be gutted to have lost Bird. He's one of the best drivers in the series and has been since inception. So I think that this is the obvious move, and I think Cassidy deserves a shot.
I do as well, and it's great to see drivers that you don't normally see, or you haven't really seen, or have been up and coming. They've been doing their bit. They've been performing well, and Nick Cassidy's probably one of those drivers who doesn't get the sort of media praise or in the media limelight, Ed, as some of the other drivers would have, especially like in your Formula 3s, your Formula 2s, who might miss out on Formula 1, and it could be a great steal to pick up one of those drivers, like a Jack Aiken, for example, coming into Formula 3. So I think it's good to see drivers from other categories and coming into Formula 3, and obviously new drivers which we haven't really seen before in those junior categories moving up into Formula 1.
Yeah, it's always good to see fresh young talent getting the chance, especially when they hit a sort of financial wall. And Nick Cassidy, I think, is not one of the guys with lots of money behind him. He's someone who usually ends up being parachuted in mid-season into, Formula 3 or those sorts of European series, but usually ends up spending most of his time, like we say, in Super Formula in Asia, and perhaps that's why he's not gotten the same coverage in Europe. But he's someone who I think is, those in the know, those who've been paying attention, very highly rate Nick Cassidy. Of course, he's one of those guys like Mitch Evans, like Brendan Hartley from New Zealand. I think I remember I first heard of him when he won Toyota Racing Series, which was sort of a winter series. I thought, well, that's the guy to watch out for. And so it's great to see him get his chance. But of course, he's up against Robin Freins, who basically single-handedly ended Simona Di Silvestre's career, beat Antonio Felix Acosta, beat Sam Bird. So Freins, he may not be, someone that instantly comes to mind as like a Formula E specialist, but he's extremely talented in his own rights. And Cassidy is going to have a real battle on his hands to show up well against Robin Freins.
I think now, though, just very quickly, as we end the topic on sort of the driver market sort of stuff, it's sort of all in place now. We're not expecting any dramatic changes. I think any dramatic changes would come from either Dragon or Venturi, but we're not expecting anything to come from them. The only person that we've kept talking about, and I don't want to repeat ourselves too much from mine and Jack's episode in the last one, where we talked about Oliver Turvey, but I want to get your views on this now. Because my question is, Will, is Neo now a safe seat for Turvey? And what I mean by that is, he's so underrated. People say he's incredibly underrated, but if he goes to Mahindra, let's say Mahindra now, with this Alex Lynn being in that seat, he is the last one. That's the last seat available, and if Alex Lynn does a great job there, then you can't really deny Alex Lynn the chance to, go for that seat in Season 7. But what I mean by Turvey being safe is, if he stays in that Neo bubble that he's created, he is that underrated driver. He is that driver that's so good that shouldn't be in that car that he's in, unless Neo drastically improve. Whereas if he does go to Mahindra and it doesn't quite work out for him, or he struggles against D'Ambrosio or Lynn, who knows who his teammate would be, that could be a real downer on Oliver Turvey's underrated status compared to where it is at the moment.
It depends what your motivation is in sport, doesn't it? And some people are motivated by kind of their reputation. Some are motivated by winning. And I think that for one, racing drivers and a lot of sports people, they have, immense stores of self-belief. And I think that Oliver Turvey will believe that if he goes to Mahindra, then he can kind of beat who is put in front of him. I think that it would be a bit of a short-sighted decision to kind of stay in his bubble at Neo with the fear of kind of being beaten by anyone else. And I don't think that that's the way he'll be looking at it. I think that what he'll be doing is assessing whether the options externally from Neo are a better one for his career in terms of being in a faster race car. I think that will be his only consideration. And, if that comes at potential of him losing to someone like Jerome D'Ambrosio, I think he'll take that on the chin, because he's a quality racing driver and a professional, and what he'll want more than anything else is to be in a car that can compete for race victories and points.
Because I suppose, Ed, we've seen it with Turvey, and I know you have that Neo cap. You have a little soft spot for old Neo, Ed. So I just want to get your views on it, because obviously Turvey's been their star driver for years, and I suppose now him and Daniel Abt, this is a huge, as I said in previous episodes, it's huge now going for him, because if he beats Daniel Abt going into this 6 races, then he sort of puts him in that level, that category, to go, you know what, Mahindra, I deserve this drive. I deserve to be in your team and make your team push forward. So I think, as I said, big 6 races for Turvey, but what do you think? Do you think he's safe in that seat, and if he doesn't leave there, then he's always going to be this driver who was so underrated but never had the opportunity to achieve anything? Or do you see him actually eventually moving on when the opportunity arises?
Well, I remember in your interview with Oliver Turvey a few months back, you brought this up with him, and he said, look, it's nice to be, underrated, and it's nice to hear people saying these great things about you. But at the same time, you can tell in his response in the interview that he would much rather have a more competitive car. That being this underrated guy who everyone acknowledges is way better than the car he's driving is more of it's sort of a consolation for him, I think. I think he would much rather just be maybe seen as overrated, but be in like some great machinery that allows him to get amazing results. I think any racing driver would, to be honest. Despite what some, like, say, the Fernando Alonso's of this world may have you believe. But I think it's Berlin is another great opportunity, because against Ma, it's really hard to sort of gauge how well Oliver Turvey is driving when the guy in the other car is someone who has really been struggling to get to grips with the championship for many years, unfortunately. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how he matches up against Daniel Abt, and will he make the move to Mahindra? I think the main thing about Mahindra is it going to be significantly more competitive than Neo 333 promises to be going forward, because we know 333 are going through restructuring at the moment. Are they going to build their own powertrain? Are they not? There's still the questions that need to be answered there. Moving to Mahindra, like any move, what we're talking about Sanvezzo as a risk, but I can see the attraction. Whether he will go with it depends on whether Dilbagh Gill and the team are able to really tempt him. I think they would probably love to have Oliver Turvey in the car. It also depends how well Alex Lynn goes, of course. So lots of factors to consider. Personally, I think Turvey, inertia has set in at this point. He's probably going to stay at Neo 333.
Right, so
and they won't let him go either.
Yeah, well, I can't see why Neo would want to let him go, but I suppose why did Virgin want to let Sam go? So at the same time, I think the driver has more to say than the team. I don't think the team can reject proposals or reject offers like in football, for example. But let's talk something different. We're going to talk about the calendar now, actually, because a report came out that Formula E, and to be fair, like, this report that came out has always been happening. Like, Formula E talks of about 26 different cities, but there were some few interesting cities that I wanted to pick out, and maybe talk about overall, like, what calendar size do Formula E want? Because obviously we've got double-header races in one city, Saudi Arabia and London, for example. But before not having any double-header races, how many races, like, cities do we actually want to visit? Because I think it's 12 cities at the moment, 14 races. So I think we're going to discuss that. But some of the cities, that I want to talk about, Japan. For me, Japan is huge. A huge market that Formula E, I think, needs to break into. And they're talking to Yokohama, which we've discussed before, because if you can't fit into Tokyo, or maybe even Kyoto, for example, Yokohama, through the Rugby World Cup, through just lots of sports going on in Japan at the moment, and in previous years, Yokohama's really built itself up as some sort of, a city that, could be in contention. So I was really happy, actually, to see that Formula E are talking to Japan, and Yokohama especially.
Yeah, I mean, Japan has always been a brilliant host of Formula One Grand Prix, and he's got in Fuji and Suzuka in recent years, two absolutely fantastic circuits. So yeah, I think that it's obviously a country with a huge kind of motorsport heritage, and plenty of manufacturers that have been successful in kind of all forms of motorsport. So it would make a huge amount of sense for Formula to try and really break into that market and that huge fan base. So yeah, I'd love to see Formula E go to Japan. I think that it has the potential to be really popular. And I think, yeah, as you say, I like the idea of not just always kind of aiming at the capital cities. And, if Yokohama's kind of been this bit of a hub for sports, then I think that it makes a huge amount of sense.
And the thing is, imagine the Formula E merchandise that to Japan. What sort of hat will we get? We won't get no DRS hat, but what sort of rear diffusers type hat will we get from Formula E? Maybe it'd be the front rather than the actual rear of the car. But I think Japan, honestly, Ed, would be an amazing thing. But there's a couple of cities. Obviously, there's tons of cities to talk about, but we're not going to talk about all of them. For example, Formula E wanted another race in China. I don't think we need another race in China. Either move away from Sanya, because Sanya's like, what's Sanya? Like, where? I know it's like the capital of this little, it's like a capital of this little tiny island off the coast of China, basically mainland China. But if you want to properly race in China, like we were in Beijing or Shanghai, for example, go to those cities and drop Sanya. I don't think we need two races in China, for example.
But it is a big market for them, though, of course, for electric cars in China. So I can see from the manufacturer's point of view why they're pushing for that.
Of course, but then I suppose at the same time, like, I don't know. I just don't think we need two races in China. I think one is enough. Because we want to try and fit as many different cities as possible. When you've got 26 different countries, technically, or cities talking to you, you want to try and fit and have a broad range. If you start building up a potential 16-round championship with two from the same country, and it gets a bit stale. I feel. So
yeah. Also, not sure if you guys have been reading news, but China, not exactly favourite of the month right now in international relations.
Of course. But anyway, Cape Town in South Africa, Ed, was another one I was thinking of, and Jack Pico, Sweden. In Heidelberg, I suppose Will could probably better pronounce that than myself. But, some interesting cities there. I think Cape Town would be awesome. Again, Africa, if we do lose Marrakesh, to go back into South Africa this time with Cape Town. And I think Sweden, obviously, did have a racetrack. I think it's Anstrup, which is the racetrack again. Anderstorp, sorry. I knew my pronunciation was not going to be correct on that. And obviously there is a sort of racing culture in Sweden, and obviously Sweden is sort of ahead of the game in terms of 2025. I think it is that they want to sort of ban the petrol and diesel cars and move to just the more electric cars being produced and driven on those roads. So I think Sweden could be a huge market for Formula E to show off what that country is actually doing with electric vehicles.
Yeah, I agree completely about Sweden as well. It's almost a shame that Felix Rosenqvist has gone to IndyCar and gotten his first win in IndyCar very recently, actually. But it would be great to have him or another talented Swede, super Swede, as it were, in Formula E to really get the fans to really get behind a bit, perhaps. One place where that is on the list that we haven't talked about yet is Eindhoven in the Netherlands. Obviously, Robin Freins, Nick de Vries in the championship, just joining with Mercedes, big manufacturer too, both doing really well. And there's a big support behind that bid as well. We did a story on that, I think, earlier this year or at the very end of last year. And it's good to see that bid is still open, that people are sort of taking that seriously as well. So I think more in Central Europe would be really interesting. But Cape Town, South Africa, also really interesting as a sort of, obviously with Marrakesh dropping off the calendar, to have somewhere else to go to in Africa as a continent, because obviously it's a fascinating place, and really that's going to be interesting to see how electric mobility affects it.
But Will, what do we think now about the calendar, right? Because as I said, it's 12 cities, 14 rounds. Okay, let's imagine that we've got the two double headers at London, 2 races at London, 2 races at Diriyah, right? So that's 4 rounds already. How many rounds do Formula E need? How big? Because obviously, like Formula 1, 22 races this season. It's a huge calendar. I'm not saying we go that big. But to be honest with you, with the amount of cities that want Formula E races and the amount of interest, they could easily fill a 22 race calendar, I think, Formula E. excluding double headers probably. So I was just trying to think, what would your roughly, for me, I think personally, I would say 17, 18 would be with double headers. So you'd probably go to about 15 cities and have like a couple of double headers. What would your, how many cities would you like Formula E to go to? How big of the calendar would you like to see?
It's a difficult one. I'm probably not one of these people who subscribes to this idea that kind of less is more with motor racing. I know there are a lot of people who are kind of railing against the idea of 22 Grand Prix in a season, and they go back to the days when we only had 15 or 8 races in a whole season. But I like the idea of adding more races. More Formula E that I see on TV and get to go to, like, the better for me. So yeah, I think you're probably right. About 18 is probably the limit, because you've got to consider firstly that this is a series partly about championing and furthering the cause of kind of reversing climate change, and I don't think that the best way to set that example was by ridiculous air miles traveling all over the world all year round. So I think the idea of kind of double headers and regional based rounds where you're limiting travel as much as possible is probably a good way to go. But yeah, I think the idea of I think Ed was talking about Eindhoven, but also I think I read a story on the website recently about potentially going to Assen as a permanent circuit. But then also I recently spoke with Tasman Pepper, who's a South African racing driver in the W Series, and she was talking about kind of motorsport in South Africa, and the fact that it's kind of gone under the radar slightly, especially since it lost the Grand Prix back in the 90s. So I really like the idea of going to South Africa for a race. So yeah, I think for me, I think you're probably spot on there with about 18 rounds. I probably would get rid of the double header in Diriyah, because I don't think it's the best race on the calendar, although they had 2 pretty good rounds earlier this season. It all depends as well, because if you're getting out to the Gen 3 and we're having longer races, then maybe it's slightly different. But if you've got short races, 12 45-minute races a season doesn't seem like that much. So it really depends what they do with Gen 3, but I think probably 18 is a sensible number.
And just picking up, actually, because the comment you made there actually about flying miles, right, has been a widely debated one. And Formula E obviously wanted to build a calendar that was economical. But obviously with this introduction of Jakarta and South Korea in the middle of the European season, Ed, it's really, the air miles are all over the place at the moment. And Formula E, people saying, you're supposed to be a green championship, and you're flying around the world left, right and centre, isn't proving good for those credentials. So obviously we're talking about increasing the calendar, and I think with Formula E, when they go into season 8 and they become obviously a world championship next season, but they'll be the second season of their world championship, they haven't really had a chance to add these series that they probably wanted to add next year, probably because of the current situation with the pandemic, probably hasn't been able to happen. So season 8 pushing it into season 2 of the world championship probably makes sense, but it's got to be clever in how they do this, because if they do start flying here, there and everywhere, then it's not a championship that is trying to promote sustainability.
Yeah, it's certainly not great for the image, and it certainly sets off those internet commentators who like to waggle their fingers, as you demonstrated so beautifully, Flores, there. But I think I remember Jack Nicholls being asked about this a while back, and he said basically, look, I don't think it's hypocritical flying around the world using, what everyone else uses, but then setting up this event that's carbon neutral and making our point that way. And I think you still have to at least make some kind of attempt. I like sort of what Extreme E is trying to do, well, Gag is trying to do with Extreme E, of course, where he's got the whole thing on a boat, and so there's big gaps between the races in Extreme E, and so they all get on this older retrofitted cruise liner, and they basically have all the teams that live in there and go from race to race on they put all the cars on the boat and they go from stage to stage, or circuit to circuit, as it were, on Extreme E. So I'm a little unclear about how they construct the circuits, but whatever, it's all in these relatively abandoned places. But I don't think, obviously it's not like a one-to-one, but there's a sort of attempt there, and I think Formula E needs to really think about, like I say, the image that it shows to the world. I think it needs to do more to highlight the green stuff that it already does, rather than necessarily rethinking the wheel, in my opinion, and sort of trying to, put it so there's only 5 rounds per season, but they all go. Everything's delivered by freight and it takes ages. And obviously, other things. There's so many things that can cancel a race, like someone wants to hold a festival on that street, so the whole circuit that you're going to use has to be like thrown out the window. Basically, that's what happened in one of the Swissie Prix at Zurich, wasn't it? Yeah, one year, and that's why they moved to Bern. And of course, there are protests at Bern too. So all sorts of little things can happen. That's more the sort of things that Formula E, logistically is trying to work their head around. They're not necessarily. It may not necessarily be the first thought of, we need to make sure the calendar's ordered in this way. It's more, we need to make sure the race happens, rather than we need to make sure it's necessarily giving the right image to people, the way we transport the freight and stuff.
Right. So the last thing to talk about, actually, before we go, because we're running out of time, but Will, I just want to point this out to you. Mission control. Formula E, they're reducing part of the cost savings. There are tons of things Formula E doing the cost savings, reducing the amount of tyres they can have from 4 to 3, reducing the amount of personnel that can be at the circuits, and now they're going to reduce the amount of sort of the mission control, the sort of the data side of things that's coming from the car. Obviously, there's not much at the moment, but trying to reduce that so there's sort of that helps with the less people being there, because you don't have to have people there to monitor said mission control and all the strategy and all that sort of stuff. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. Obviously, a lot of cost saving talk at the moment, and obviously with Gen 2 Evo, which could be running for 1 year, not 1 year, and that's like 300,000 a car. So with everything that Formula E are doing currently right now, I don't think Gen 2 Evo will run. But what do you think on, obviously, Formula E reducing the sort of control for teams with their sort of strategy, mission control sort of stuff in order to cut costs? Cut costs. There we go.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the kind of way that the world and motorsport is going. You need to find ways of making things more affordable, but you also need a way of limiting the amount of people in and around the track. And I think this has been the case, as we've seen Formula One and IndyCar and NASCAR return. They're doing it on a slightly stripped back basis. And, I don't think that it's ideal for the teams, because they obviously want everything that they possibly can so that they can make their car go fast. But at the same time, I don't think from an entertainment standpoint, it's something that necessarily we see as fans or as journalists. So, yeah, I think that it's unfortunately just one of these kind of side effects of the current situation that we're living in. But hopefully, in terms of the spectacle, it won't have a huge impact. And as they always say, the less data, the less running that these teams have, because they're so professional and so sophisticated in the way that they kind of manage these cars, the more exciting and unpredictable racing we get. So maybe it will contribute in that way. But yeah, I think that from a spectacle standpoint, it's fine.
Boys, we've come to the end of the show. Thank you so much for being on today.
Oh, no worries, Jack.
Thank you very much.
Right, so remember, Twitch. We have a Twitch channel where obviously we're really looking forward to the season restarting, and hopefully we can use Twitch for some more chat sort of live shows. But in the meantime, we've still got it, so we're playing some F1 2020. So if you're free and available and you can catch one of our streams, hit the link below. Also, we've got a Discord channel, so if you want to hit the Discord link, come and join the party basically that's going on in the Discord channel at the moment with our community. Feel free to do that. And finally, there's something else that we can talk about. Actually, yeah, like and subscribe the video. How can you forget that as a YouTuber?
How could you,
hit the like
yeah.
and the subscribe button. I've been going on about it for weeks. But yeah, if you haven't hit the like and subscribe button and you haven't subscribed to us, please do. Thank you so much. You've been watching the FEZ Show. We'll be back next week. Goodbye.